Today I've had a new experience. Every All Saints Sunday, in the prayers before the congregation calls out the names of their departed loved ones, the leader of the prayer names members of our congregation who have died in the last year. This year, for the first time, I heard the name of a member of my own family in that list. Wilma Duke, my mother, and there was her picture, this cherished saint of our church family, my mom. The grief isn't wrenching, since she had a very long, good life and a good death too. But we miss her, and the grief is in the active mode, which is to say that I'm currently in the long and fruitful labor of letting go, opening the hands and releasing her from presence to absence, from conversation to silence, releasing her body to the earth and to what awaits her on the other side of death, releasing her most of all to the love of God. We are, in other words, entrusting her into the light, into the eternal mystery of God's love for her. This is grief on its way to healing, and it has reminded me of words from Mary Oliver. To live in this world, you must be able to do three things: to love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones, knowing your own life depends on it, and when the time comes to let it go, to let it go. And the truth is, my mother gave me some pretty good help in that effort, because this is the way she lived, trusting her own sense of need, her own griefs, her own dreams, her own concerns, into the love of God. It is not that she did not bear the burdens of them heavily. She did, and she relentlessly prayed over them. But she was free of the ongoing tight grip on her life of anxiety. She did what she could. She prayed as she could, and she opened her hands in trust. And when I think of other saints I have known, as delightfully distinctive as each of them may be, it has seemed to me that most of them share this quality. They bore what they had to bear, they did what they had to do, and then in one way or another they lived in open-handed trust of others, of God. And as I think of them now, my mother among them now, it's almost like I hear them say, "You can do this too. Try some more letting go. Try a little more trust." Jesus said essentially the same thing one day when he was talking with a crowd about the problem of anxiety. They were all outdoors, and as he often did, he pointed them to an element of nature. There were birds all around, and he said to the crowd, "Look at those birds and think about what you're seeing." And on that hillside there were wildflowers in bloom. He pointed also to them and said, "Just look at those and think about what you're seeing." These people had come to see him, but he redirected their gaze to birds, to flowers. He does something like it still to us, directing our gaze to the world of nature around us, asking us to listen, directing us to the human world around us as well. This is to free us up from the ongoing tight grip of anxiety. He had just finished saying, don't worry about your life, don't worry about your body, and now says, look, the birds don't do one lick of worry or work, and they have all that they need. They have a world just full of free bird food. The Creator is crazy about birds and makes certain they are cared for. Now, can you imagine how much is the care of God for you? And these wildflowers, not one of them ever picked up needle and thread, and yet looked at the colors they are clothed in, more dazzling than any garment any of the rich folk in the world ever got to wear. Because God, the master gardener, delights in them and gives care to them. And can you imagine how cared for your life really is? It is not hard to point out that there may be a flaw in this analogy. If you and I were daisies or chickadees, we wouldn't worry either. But our situations are very, very different. We live in this complex web of human systems, relationships, commitments, economies, expenses, horrific illnesses, governments, societies, evils. And we have consciousness of outcomes and consequences and possibilities in the far future and the near future. And we have consciousness of ourselves in it. And people like us who are in it. We are not like petunias or like chickadees. And yes, we are going to worry. Of course, he didn't say, be like them. He said, notice them. Just notice that they have what's needed, that the source of their existence is extravagant in bestowing on them what they need, and adds a great flourish of uncalled for beauty and delight. And yes, in the confines of your human world systems, it is very concerning and it is scary. But notice, always notice the larger world around and within it that speaks to you of abundance, of beauty, of goodness, of provision. And you are part of it. What if you opened your hands to the source and trusted your concerns to the one who delights in giving care? Couldn't you do a little more letting go? Try a little more trusting. I say a little more because anxiousness is not a condition that can just be whisked a way we mustn't pretend that it can be. In the first place, real circumstances are serious enough that some worrying is in order. Which is why I suspect Jesus smiled when he said, "Don't worry about tomorrow, because tomorrow has enough troubles already in itself." Besides that, we all occupy different spaces on an anxiety continuum. Some of us are just naturally wired to be a little more laid back. Others of us are more naturally chemically wired for anxiety. Can't help it. So it can be pointless or worse than pointless to be told by someone, "Don't be anxious." So when Jesus says those very words, I don't think he meant quit feeling it. I think he meant stop living it. Let your living do some letting go. Make decisions, undertake actions that embody more trust, even if you're hesitant and afraid. Try on some trusting behavior. Live as if you trust, and more keep living like that trust. For example, say words that you have been afraid to say, but that need saying because they're true and they could make an important difference. And give time that you have thought you couldn't afford to give, but you can, to the outreaching toward those who are in need of some outreaching love. Or for that matter, to give some care in time to yourself, if that's what you're most lacking in. And give money. Money you figured you couldn't afford to give, but you can, because it is right and faithful and will do much good and be a faithfulness to you. And share with a friend something that has been burdening you and you have thought you ought to keep to yourself. And pray. Even if it seems awkward, even if you fear you'll feel stupid, and even if you're not sure it means anything anyway, just press on through and say the needs, the feelings, the dreams, the difficulty, the despair that are your own. Trust and keep praying. So act on the premise that you can trust. Jesus was getting at that when he was talking about this issue, for he finished it by saying this: "You seek first the kingdom of God and its righteousness, and all the rest of this will be given to you also." Give yourself first to action, to word, to prayer, to gift, for the sake of God's reign in the world. And you'll find there's more than enough of the rest. Here's the problem with anxiety. When it takes charge, it limits, sometimes even shuts down our capacity to choose well, to love well, to give well, to live well. There is an ancient Old Greek root word on which that first version of our word for anxiety is based. The root word means, guess what? To be strangled, to be choked. And sometimes we do feel that. But the choice to live trust means a life that can breathe, that can make some non-fear-based decisions, can venture more, can give more, can love people more, can trust our own sweet, struggling selves more into God's love for us all, God's care for our very own living. When human babies are born, their hands are curled into tiny fists. And when human beings die, more often than not, they die with their hands opened. Chosen or not, human life tends to take us from the tight grip to the opened hand. But to choose that, the opening of the hand and the letting go, to choose it along the way of living, is to choose life, love. It is to choose each other. It is to choose higher purpose. It is to choose thriving and awakening. Whatever else heaven may be, it is not a place of clenched fists. The saints dwell there with hands open in praise and arms open in welcome. And so with us on this good earth, where life is gift and the kingdom of God is ours to strive for, and love is ours to give and to receive, and where living in trust is growing toward wholeness and toward joy.